on this computer?
That's not okay.
Okay, so this is about a lecture on what the varieties of a language, any language. And let me just begin with this. There are two ways in which one can look uh, at the varieties of a language, according to use and according to user. Let's say according to use. There, I've given two over there, register, diglossia. We'll do diglossia later, register. Since it is according to use, not according to user, so it will depend upon the situation in which that variety is used. The register means the special language, the technical language, the jargon of a particular subject or situation or experience or, and so on. Like there is the register of doctors, what the doctors, nurses, when they have to, when they say loss of appetite, don't feel like eating, they call it anorexia. And if a person cannot sleep, that would be, in their language, that would be called insomnia. Similarly, if they talk about excess gain in weight, etc., then they have a word for it, and that is obesity, obesity. Obesity is now uh, uh, matter of concern. It's a condition in some states of the US and elsewhere too, because people have too much sugary food. So they have calories, more calories than they burn, and they get fat. The doctors would call it obese. Okay. So that is the register of medicine. According to the use, according, if you go to a doctor, etc., then that place, that sort of subject, the requirement of that is our special words. Similarly, you have the vocabulary of every subject, linguistics, for instance. When you came into this course, you talked about sounds and grammar, etc., but you did not talk about phonemes, allophones. Now you have the special language which you use, which is phonemes, allophones, and so on. Now, personally, I find, and other people also find, that if you use this kind of special language, specialized kind of language, people do not understand very well. And that then it becomes, it's a fault, and it's called jargon. So some people keep using the jargon of their subject everywhere. Economists do that, linguists do that, the military does that, doctors do that. You know, all everyone does that. That makes whatever they say and whatever they write difficult to understand. So if you're writing jargon-free language, then that is a language which everybody can understand. That is accessible language. I try to write accessible English for the most part, even if I'm writing a book on something to do with language, or history, um, or Islamic studies, etc. I try to use as far as possible jargon-free language. However, academia, academics, that is to say, people who teach in universities, they're called academics, they indulge in what is called this kind of jargon, and they find their writing is generally difficult. Academies, as it is called. Bureaucrats write in their own language, bureaucraties, and the legal language of law is also difficult to understand. So that those things are called register, if once they are absolutely necessary for that, but it is according to use, and they may they descend into something like um, in something like difficult to understand, inaccessible, technical language or jargon. That is all the language according to use. By the way, these days there is uh, well, not these days, actually, it's been going on for some time. There's a movement for plain English, which is a movement which says that instead of the more difficult language of the law with Latin and with difficult words arranged, etc., it should be made simpler, and one should use plain English so that people who go to the courts of law can actually understand what's going on. Similarly, they say that plain language should be used by bureaucrats also because that affects human beings' lives. And they say that plain language should also be used in every other thing, like uh, when you are selling things to people, then shops should use plain language. Big business concerns should so use plain language because people do not understand how they may be cheating you, how they may be fleecing you, or selling you product which you don't really need. So this is register. The other one we are going to talk about later, diglossia. So I'm going to leave it right now. I'll come to the right side of the board of the slide before you, which is language according to the division of language according to user. The user, the person who's using it. The person might use an idiolect. Idiolect is the peculiar variety of that language which you yourself use. Your personal touch, so to speak. You may use a certain word again and again. It might be your pet word or pet words or pet phrase. In Urdu, it's called takiya kalam. Sokhne takiya. And so you might use some habitual words again and again. Or you may use a certain idiom, an expression, which becomes a signature of your when you're speaking um, that particular language. Or and always this your particular tone, pronunciation, the is going to be different always. That's why we recognize voices on the phone, because there is something about your voice which is different from others. It is again a kind of signature. So that's your idiolect. Now, you live in a community, and if it's an area bound community, uh, then you speak your local dialect, which means area bound variety, geographically bound variety of a language. In some parts, in your village, uh, uh, in some part of the country or the province, Punjab, you might be speaking the kind of language, the kind of variety which is spoken over there. It will be similar to the standard Punjabi of Lahore, but it is going to be different also. So you may understand um, the language because it's really a dialect, it's really a variety of the same language, but sometimes the differences are very great. In England, for instance, the differences are so great that very often it's difficult for English people uh, who speak standard British English to understand the speakers of dialect. They call them dialect. Unfortunately, people look down upon dialects because city people in general look down upon village people, educated people are the worst sinners in this respect because they look down upon those who have not been educated. So they look down upon their language also. However, from our point of view, that's to say from the point of view of uh, scientific researchers on language, linguists, there's nothing inferior about a dialect. It's just that since it isn't used in the domains of power, which are, of course, higher administration and judiciary, government itself, and uh, higher education, education itself actually, all of it, research, commerce, business, everything. Because they are not used in these domains, they don't have the vocabulary which is associated with those domains. So it's obviously the total vocabulary is less. But this is something which human beings themselves have done because of commercial reasons or military reasons or other reasons, etc. Otherwise, they are all sounds conveying, what is a language? Language is sounds coming out of the human mouth which convey meaning or emotion or attitude. So, area-bound varieties of language, dialects do the same. The standard, dialect, the standard variety, it does the same, etc. It's just how you use it. It's not a matter of actually intrinsic inferiority and superiority, right? But it is a point of some concern that if you know only the geographically bound variety of your language, you may not be able to get good jobs. So that certainly is there, but that's a human arrangement. It's got nothing to do with the variety itself. It's just that the variety is not used in the domains of power. If your language itself is not used in the domain of power, you won't get jobs either in that. So it's a matter of how human beings have arranged the world, and that arrangement, as we all know, is not always just. Okay, let's come to the third one, which is sociolect. Sociolect is the variety used by a certain social class, right? That is to say, it may be the upper classes, they speak a sociolect. It may be the subaltern classes or working classes, which are, like under privileged. Those are the, and generally, of course, they're peasants and they're workers, etc. Those are subalterns. So subaltern classes have their own varieties, and they are, in a sense, the identity markers of that group or of that class. In the United States, the African Americans, those who were brought by the white Americans, by the Caucasians who went from Europe, they brought them from Africa in slave trade. They speak English, but their English is different. So their English is called Ebonics, and it is a sociolect. It differentiates this social class from other social classes. Britain is a society about which I know more than I do about other societies of Europe, so I'll talk about how English is used. Well, British society, as you probably know, was a very class-oriented society. There was the top, there was, of course, the royalty, and then there was the top lords, etc., the aristocracy of Great Britain, and then there was the gentry, gentlemen and ladies, and then there was the working classes, right? That's how the division was. Right now, the sociolect, which means the language belonging to a certain social class, a variety of language belonging to a certain social class. Let's take the variety which distinguishes the British middle classes, um, the gentry, and also the aristocracy. The kind of English they use is called RP, received pronunciation. Received pronunciation is the kind of English, it's also called BBC English, it is also called Oxbridge. Oxbridge, that is associated with the universities of Oxford and Cambridge, and received means that it was received in the court of Queen Victoria. Right, so this English is spoken by the gentlemen and the ladies of Britain, the educated classes, and no matter where they live, in whichever geographical locale they live, that's the language which they use, because it is taught in schools. Girls go to the finishing schools, and boys go to their own schools. And if they belong to the upper classes, they went to what were called public schools, which are not really public schools, which are private schools run by different boards, etc., for the upper classes, like Eton and Harrow, Winchester, etc. So they used to go there. And they taught them the sociolect, which is called RP, or Oxbridge. The prestige of this was very high, and till a few years back, you couldn't get a decent job as an officer or any other decent job, or someone who announced things on the BBC, etc. You couldn't get a good job like that. You couldn't be actually a gentleman in your manners and in your by your pronunciation if you did not speak in the RP of the Oxford pronunciation. One of my friends called David Critchlow was very able. He belonged to the working classes. His father was a carpenter, and he had done very well. He had gone to LSE, and he got a first division. And now he got an MA, and he wanted to enter the civil service. And they wouldn't give him a job. They said that he would not wear a tie, he would wear jeans, and he deliberately did not speak Oxbridge, although he could, but he spoke his native variety, which was what I just told you, what is called a dialect. He spoke the native variety of Derbyshire. Okay, Derbyshire. So he was rejected throughout. Till at last he got fed up. He put on a necktie, he put on a suit, and he spoke RP, and he got selected. He already had a first division and all. He got selected. So he attributed it to the language, to the social. Maybe there were other reasons. Maybe it was the dress. But he said that the main reason was there were other people in the same dress in those days. In the 1980s, jeans, etc., had started. So he said it wasn't that. It was because I insisted upon speaking Derbyshire English. And they would not understand me. They would pretended not to, or they actually didn't. I don't know. Well, it is somewhat difficult to understand the first time you go. I mean, the first day when I went as a student, I was appalled. The first student who came in spoke a language which I did not understand. And the second one, a boy, that was Dave, who came in, again did not spoke a language which I did not understand fully. He had to slow down to utter every word separately for me to understand. Then the third male student came in, and I could understand, but he spoke too fast. So I missed a lot of it. And then a girl came in, and Billy spoke exactly the kind of English which I'd heard on the TV and in films, and I could understand her extremely, every word of it was clear. And I said, well, Billy, it looks like I'll have to go back to Pakistan because I can't understand a word of what our friends here are saying. She said, they're speaking dialect. Doesn't matter. The lecturers are going to speak in my kind of English. So I said, and what is the difference? She said, well, I speak standard English, and these people speak dialect. So, and the lecturers will also speak standard English. You will understand. And this is exactly what happened. I understood the lecturers very well, and Billy, and it took me quite some time to understand the other three. So it does, there is the dimension of snobbery, but there is also the possibility that sometimes one really doesn't understand because one is not exposed to it. Okay. Let me give you a story. It's an anecdote. I don't know if it is true. It is probably not apocryphal, but the story is as follows. In 1910, etc., as you know, Britain, there was a lot of uh, enthusiasm for democracy, equality, fraternity, and so on. And universities started admitting girls. And so the story goes that this young man went to Cambridge, working class boy. Father was a mason, layer of bricks, etc. He went to Cambridge, and the boy was very bright, and fell in love with the Lord's daughter, and who had, of course, being a Lord's daughter, had been brought up to speak Oxford standard English or Oxford. So, fell in love, and she announced to her father that she would marry this young man. And the Earl was appalled. He sat with his head in his hands. He couldn't stop her because that was no longer possible. Girls would tell their parents, but the parents couldn't stop them anymore. So there he sat with his head in his hands, clutching his head, what to do. So the butler came in. He said, "My lord, what's the matter?" And you look distraught, my lord. What's the matter? And he said, "Well, Donald Bain, the problem is that Miss So-and-so," and he gave his daughter's name, "has gone, and she is engaged to this boy, and this boy is a stonemasor's son. What shall we do?" So the butler says, "My lord, invite him to the castle." He said, "I don't want to see his face." And you say, "Invite him to the castle?" He said, "Yes, my lord, we'll invite everybody else also. Big party. Dinner, formal dinner on the table." He said, "All right." And so the idea was to put him to shame. So, well, the day came, and the butler, announces who's coming in. So he said, the butler announcing people like Admiral so-and-so, Sir John so-and-so, Admiral of the fleet. He comes in, and someone else, cabinet minister or a general, etc. Professor so-and-so, Regius Professor of Philosophy at the University of Oxford. He comes in, etc. Lord so-and-so, His Grace the Duke of so-and-so, all these people came in, etc. My Lord the Bishop of Exeter, whatever. So everyone had a title, almost everybody had a title. And then he says, Mr. Brown. He doesn't have a title, he is just Mr. Brown. Well, Mr. Brown comes in, and he is wearing he doesn't have a suit of his own, so he has borrowed something like, which is like fitting a suit, and but there he is. Well, we go to the table, and they've placed so many forks and knives on both sides. They've got three kinds of glasses, and he doesn't know how to use all these forks and knives. He doesn't know which is the fish knife and which is the other knife, because working class people only use one fork and one knife. So he doesn't know which glasses, etc. So the whole thing is a mess. And the butlers and the waiters keep saying, please, this one, pointing out his mistakes, unobtrusively, but nevertheless embarrassing enough for him. So this was happening, and then when he spoke, nobody understood him or pretended not to. And when an old aunt, dowager aunt, the Duchess of such and such place, asked him as to where he had been schooled. And he talked of an ordinary school, uh, grammar school. And he said, where is it, Eton or Harrow or Winchester? And he says, none of these. And they said, oh, I didn't know there were such schools also. Because either she doesn't know or she's pretending. Well, the thing ended and they had a big fight. And of course, the engagement was broken off. And, the whole thing ended. The butler was right. His accent did it all. And of course, his table manners and accent did it all. Because the accent was such that everyone, they were asking again and again, are you speaking English? Right? So sociolect is a big marker of class, social group to which you belong in some societies, especially in a class-ridden society like Britain. It still is, but things have changed a lot since then. But now there are people who speak all kinds of accents on the BBC, etc. So that is possible now. And even in you can have lecturers who speak dialect, even in universities. This was certainly not true even 30, 40 years back. So how come a certain variety, area-bound variety, a dialect, how come it becomes what is called standard? The standard is nothing more than a variety. It's nothing more than a variety. The standard English or standard Urdu or standard Punjabi, etc., is simply a variety. What happens is that people with power to use it start using it in different fields. They start using it in the domains of power. They start using it in education, in law, in the courts of law, and science, everything to do with power, in business, and commerce, and so on and so forth. When they start doing this, it starts acquiring new words, neologism, as we talked about last time. And so it's written in books. People describe its grammar. Children are taught that grammar. And children assume that this, which is being taught to us, etc., this is what the school teachers and everybody says is the standard. So standard does not mean that it is the best, but they assume that it is the best. Whereas actually some human beings have called it the standard. It's not that intrinsically it is better. It is that slowly its vocabulary and everything else is enriched because it is in the hands of the powerful. And that is why people say, then what happens is that people start looking down upon the other area-bound varieties. Because they still remain within that area. People speaking just those varieties will not get good jobs, etc. They will not get a high social position. They cannot marry well, etc. They cannot get, they cannot enjoy the kind of life which other people speaking these so-called standard are going to enjoy. So they are relegated to the margins. In other words, the process of making what is called standard has nothing to do with the merits of that particular variety, because it is a variety which is standardized. So by making grammars of it, by making dictionaries of it, and so on and so forth. It has something to do with the exercise of power. Now, that is what happened in the case of the kind of English which was used by a certain class, the ruling classes in the area of London, south east of England. They took the local variety, the area-bound variety, as used by the middle classes over there and the upper classes over there. They started using it and they started using it in the chancery, and where the foreign service works, etc., in courts of law, in the universities, in the schools, and in the church, and everything else which you can think of, anything in the domains of power. They started publishing in it. So the press started using it. The spelling of it was standardized, fixed. After Shakespeare's time, spelling wasn't very fixed. Then it became more fixed. Excuse me. So all this created what we now call standard English. It's just one variety among others. It's been standardized by power. This is what happened in the case of French of Paris. Not of everyone in Paris, but again of the middle class and the upper classes of Paris. This was standardized. It was declared the French language, and it was the only language in which you could get any kind of position of somewhat more money than others and somewhat more power than others in France. So people had to forget their own local languages and their area-bound varieties, their dialects. They died, and the French of Paris became the school language, the church language, so on and so forth, the standard French of France. In the case of Urdu, this is what that a certain, there were many varieties all the way from unstandardized varieties which keep changing in the whole so-called Hindi belt, etc., which were intelligible mutually, sometimes difficult with difficulties, sometimes otherwise, etc., but intelligible. But then what happened was that the variety which was near the King's Court in Delhi, first Agra and then Delhi, Inshallah Khan Insha, a poet, as also a writer and a linguist of Urdu, has written about it. There's a book in Persian, which I used when I was writing this account of Urdu in my own book, from Hindi to Urdu. I wrote about it. This is in Persian. So Insha started off with describing what kind of language is fasih, is the most eloquent, is the best, more correct, right? And correctness he defined as that language, that kind of Hindi in which there are many Persian words, right? Which is, of course, the language of the aristocracy of Delhi, of his time. And he used it as an identity marker and as a sort of boundary marker. This, he didn't call it, in those days it wasn't called Urdu, Rekhta was the term used for it, etc. And it was also called Hindi. The word Urdu was coming in, but it was not used as much as Rekhta was used and as much as Hindi was used. But the point was that this was the language of the King's Court and the Mughal King's Court, and a few people over there. It excluded everybody else. Whom did it exclude? Insha has written about whom it excludes. First of all, they are Hindus. So it is against Hindus. Then they are Punjabis. Insha is against them also, because their language, even if they learn Urdu, according to Inshallah Khan Insha, it is still not fasih. It is not correct. Then it excludes the working classes, even of Delhi, because they speak Karkhandari Boli. It excludes them. Then it excludes the people who speak some variety of Hindi Urdu in the small towns of India, kasbas, in small towns of UP, even UP, Qasbas. So that's called Qasbati Zuban. India, to the extent that Insha even excludes the Sayyids of Bara, who were a very powerful family of Sayyids. He excludes them also because he says they also speak the local vernacular. They also do not speak the Fasih language, which is the language of the king's court. So then who does it have? A few people, mostly nobles, the gentry, surrounding the king. But now there was a problem. The problem was that Inshallah Khan Insha himself had gone to Lucknow. He wasn't living in Delhi anymore. Delhi was ruined, and Inshallah Khan Insha was now in Lucknow, where he served the Nawab of Awadh. So how could he? So here Insha then what he did was he said, however, the best people, the speakers of the Ahl Zuban, the people who speak the best language of Delhi, have migrated to Lucknow. So the elite of those who speak Fasih Urdu, the best Urdu, now live in Lucknow. And the head of that elite is the Nawab. So that means the Nawab is the most Fasih of all persons who speak Urdu. And so the others follow, the great nobles and so on and so forth. In short, for Insha, the Fasih Urdu is a social act which is defined actually by being Muslim and being wealthy and powerful. Okay? And belonging to the most, according to him, the aristocratic families. So that is how these things happen. That's how a lot of power enters into how we define a sociologue, how we define what is the standard language and what we define as the area on variety, which is dialect. And that's why modern linguists do not use the word dialect as much as they use the word variety. Okay. Now let me say something which you may not agree with. Suppose I just now make a claim that there is no such thing as language at all. Would you agree with this? Suppose I say there is no such thing as Urdu, there is no such thing as English, there is no such thing as Punjabi or as Pashto or as Arabic. Would you agree?
No.
You will not agree. You will not agree?
No.
Sir, I agree.
So why do you agree? It's a
Because
preposterous
like I
statement.
read, as I have read your book, so I agree with what you said in your book that what we are using as language is just different varieties of language. It's not the language, it's just different varieties of it.
Okay. Look at this. Let there be a mathematical kind of treatment of this. We all speak varieties. Okay. Okay. We have we speak our idiolects, we speak our dialects, or we speak our sociolects. Whatever we speak, including the standard variety of that language, it is still a variety. We speak a variety always. At the moment, we are speaking a non-native variety of English, which is called Pakistani English. It is a variety. So none of us speak the language. Language is then variety 1 plus variety 2 plus variety 3 plus variety 4 plus variety n. That's L, language. But language then is an abstract concept. The variety is a concrete thing. Language as such is an abstract thing. English is no more than all of its varieties added up. And Urdu is no more than all the varieties of Urdu added up. What are the varieties of Urdu? Many. One variety of Urdu is Hyderabadi Urdu. The other one is Delhi's Urdu. Third one is Lucknow's Urdu. Fourth one is Punjab Urdu. Fifth one is the way Pashtuns speak Urdu. Sixth one is the way Sindhis speak Urdu. And so on and so forth. So these are all varieties of language. And English, of course, we have just said there is the native varieties of American English, Australian English, South African English, and New Zealand's English and Canadian English and so on and so forth. And then there are other area-bound varieties in England, the English of Birmingham, the English of London's working classes, which is called Cockney, the English of Scotland, Scottish English, so forth, all these. Then there are non-native varieties of English. So there are so many native, there are so many standard varieties, so many other varieties. In short, what we have are what we call language are all varieties. Generally, when we say something like language, we don't keep this in mind and we simply look at the standardized variety, but that too is only a variety. At this point, agreed?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I told you that we are leaving diglossia out. Now let's do diglossia. Charles Ferguson was a linguist, social linguist, and he gave this concept first in a paper, which I think I have put it in your reading list. He says that some languages have a high variety, which is called H, and a low variety, which is called L. He says the H variety is used for formal purposes only, which is administration, education, speeches, writing official letters, things of a formal nature. However, things of the low variety, L variety, is used for all kinds of other purposes, socializing, public interaction, and so on and so forth. He says for instance, he says the examples he gave are classical Arabic, classical Greek, French versus Haitian Creole, standard German versus the German spoken in Switzerland. Some parts of Switzerland speak German, as you know. So there. Classical Arabic first. Arabic, you see, it's called the all. What happened to Arabic was that it was feared by early Muslims that Arabic, which is the language of the Quran, is going to change. Change is always looked down upon by people as something to be as sort of a kind of loss, a kind of decadence, a kind of falling from higher standards. In other words, a corruption of language. They wanted to guard against this change. So what they use, of course, if you have to guard against change, language changes naturally. You've got to say that this and this spelling, this and this pronunciation, this and this meaning, this is it, it is fixed, this and this grammar, it is fixed. We will not accept any change further in this. When this happened, classical Arabic slowly did not remain anybody's mother tongue. It's called Lughat al-Fusha. It is the language of the Quran. It is the language of the administration, formal education, formal lectures in a university, officials, and the foreign service, and these kind of things. But it is not the language of the person on the street. It is nobody's mother tongue. Every Arab boy or girl has to go to the school and learn Lughat al-Fusha, classical Arabic, in school. What you speak at home is demotic Arabic, which is different. I mean, in Egypt, you speak the Egyptian variety, in other places, you speak their variety, etc. But of course, you will understand. But see, in Egypt, for instance, J will not be used, Gamal will be used. Gamal Abdul Nasir, not Jamal. Okay? So when they read the Quran, they would speak J, they would know about it, but otherwise they would use Gaf. Right? So these kind of changes occur everywhere. So Yamni, the Arabic, the demotic variety spoken in Yemen is different from that which is used in Egypt, different from that which is used in parts of Arabia, and so on and so forth. So that is the classical Arabic. I did a small course in order to do some research on classical Arabic, and at the Oxford Center for Islamic Studies. And the teacher, the one who taught us, she was a young lady, and she taught us Lughat al-Fusa. She herself did not speak Lughat al-Fusa. She said nobody speaks it. It is, to us, of course, we couldn't we couldn't make out the difference because we didn't know Arabic that well. But she, for instance, she said that when I go to a restaurant, the in a class in a good one, the menu is in classical Arabic, but you talk to the waiter in demotic Arabic. You place your order in demotic Arabic because that's what you speak it. When you go to the, for instance, you go to a lecture hall in the university, and the lecture is in classical Arabic. But if the teacher wants to explain something, and the students also know that variety, the teacher starts explaining using demotic Arabic. And outside the classroom, students and teachers, they talk in demotic Arabic, not in the classical. They will not talk in Fusha. So this sort of thing, which we do here also, with us, the differences that we do it in English and Urdu, there, of course, in different varieties of Arabic. Classical Greek, it was the language of Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, etc., the language of great works of literature and philosophy and so on, and mathematics, and therefore it had tremendous prestige. So the modern demotic Greek is used as an L language, low language, and the classical one is preserved as the H language. Similarly, French, because they ruled over this area, and Creole is used as what people use in everyday life, but they refer to Standard French as their H language. So everything formal would be done in that. In Switzerland, the standard German is the H language, so the letters which would be issued from a ministry, etc., that would be in standard German. But otherwise, people use the German of the Swiss German, it's called. Otherwise, they use Swiss German. So that is the classical concept of diaglossia as given by Charles Ferguson. So far, so good, or have you not understood? Is there anything which you do not understand so far?
So can you please explain idiolect again?
Okay, idiolect. Okay, right. Let's go back. See, here it is, idiolect. It is according to user. Okay. Idiolect is the language, the variety of language used by a person individually. That means whenever one of us speaks, we speak any language we speak, no matter which other variety we're using, but we put our signature, we use certain words which we only use. So people, as soon as we start speaking, if we keep using them throughout, people know that so-and-so is talking. That is our habit. We put our signature upon our use of that language. Okay. Also, we have slightly different, because the muscles here, etc., there is a difference in the formation of the articulators, and then the dimension of the mouth and the nose and so on and so forth, etc. The way we move our tongue, and so it's not precisely exactly the same. So as- the moment we speak, etc., we put our signature by a slightly different pronunciation, slightly different tone, a slightly different feel in the voice, which you can feel. That way you can recognize a different person's voice. Every person has her or his own, let's say, a stamp upon the voice. All this comes under idiom. Okay?
Where a person can use a dialect in idiolect.
Of course. Idiolect, no matter what you're speaking, you're going to put your mark on it. But if you are
Okay.
making, I mean, for instance, if you have certain pet phrases, pet words, etc., then your idiolect will be much more your marker. People will know that so and so uses this phrase all the time or most of the time. So this person must be speaking. Okay. But otherwise, when no matter what you're speaking, you will put some mark of your own on it. So idiolect, in that sense, we all speak. But dialect, sociolect, and so on, that of course depends. If we are speaking the standard variety, people will say that we are speaking standard language. People will not say that you are speaking a dialect, whereas actually we are all speaking some kind of variety. Even if it's a standard variety, we're still a variety. There is no such thing as language. There is such a thing only as variety. And out of these varieties, the more useful one, because it is accepted in good jobs and so on and so forth, and has prestige, is generally the standard variety of any language. Non-native variety, this I did not explain fully. Non-native varieties, when what happens is that when you are using a foreign language, such as the colonial schooling system, in the British, for instance, ruled India and parts of other countries also, Africa also, for instance, they used English. So some people became adept in English. They used English throughout, even socially. So uh, they brought the rules of their language to process English. You bring your own phonological rules and other rules, etc., to process any language that you speak. So English they learned later, and they brought obviously the rules of their own language to process English. So some of the rules, when they did so, of course, the kind of English they produced was influenced by their own language. And there were differences in it from the standard British English, of course. And Pakistani English, for instance, on which I told you, I showed you a book which I had written, Pakistani English. Similarly, Baraj B. Kachru has written on Indian English. And there are people who have written on West Indian English and the English of Malaysia and so on and so forth, Singapore and so on. So all these are non-native varieties of English. It's not that they are errors. There are systemic differences because of the processing which you do according to the rules of your first language. Right? So that is what non-native variety is. An example is that we do not say uh, think, we say think, right? Because we don't have tha, we have tha in our language. So we use in Pakistani English and Indian English, we use think, we don't use think. Similarly, we don't use the diphthong O, we use the monophthong O. So we don't say road, we say road. Um, this is Ms. Seram speaking, I think. Hello? Oh, yes, I'm about to finish. I'm just about to finish. Okay. I know you need it. Okay, thank you. Sorry. We have to finish a little earlier because they need the same thing for an examination, which is online. Thank you very much. And we will talk tomorrow about the same things. Okay?
Sir, can I email you the changed summary?
Yes, please do so. Thank you.
Okay.